Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Shifting Gears. My name's Greyson Harris. That's Whitney Cowell. And today we're going to be switching it up a little bit. We're going to be talking about what is to me a very nostalgic story, but for most people it's a business story. And what we're talking about today is the rise and perceived fall of Pixar. When I say Pixar, I hope that brings up some good memories for everyone because we're going to be getting very nostalgic today. So y'all sit back and enjoy. To understand the perceived fall of Pixar, let's go back to the beginning and really show how big of a company this was and still is. So back in 1986 was when it was founded. It's founded by Steve Jobs and a group of computer graphics experts. Now, Steve was ousted by Apple in 1985. The following year, he started a new computer company called Next. Around that same time, George Lucas, the guy who came up with Star Wars, Lucasfilms, was forced to sell his computer division after a costly divorce. Happens to the best of us. This division developed hardware products such as its Pixar image computer. Now, that computer was revolutionary in that it could efficiently render enormous digital graphics, which up to that time, pretty much unheard of. So Jobs in 1986, he invested $10 million to spin Pixar out of Lucasfilms. So this is where it really all starts. Their early work, though, wasn't really focused on animation or movie making or anything like that. It was really just to sell their computer hardware. Jobs initially was interested in just selling the Pixar image computer as a business-to-business computer hardware, but it was extremely expensive and it sold very poorly.
And I would imagine not many people would know how to optimize it.
Nope, they wouldn't know how to use it really. Yeah, you're right. The big breakthrough was when Pixar's team developed an imaging software called RenderMan, which sounds like a comic book hero that I'm kind of here for. This allowed them to produce groundbreaking animated short films that won big awards like Oscars. For example, Luxo Jr. in 1986 won the Oscar for Best Animated Short Film, and Tin Toy in 1988 ended up becoming one of the baselines for the eventual Toy Story series. So that's where that one started. At this time, people weren't really used to animated characters having the depth and emotion of regular actors, right? The technology just wasn't good enough to express those kinds of emotions, and it was extremely expensive even if they could do it.
And also, I think that's around the time that animation acting was becoming popular. I mean, it was a new industry type.
Like motion tracking and stuff like that. Yeah, that was brand new around that time as well. So you're starting to see how all of these a perfect storm of events comes together to create what eventually becomes a dynasty for Pixar. Right. Before we get there, though, they did a lot of advertising work in the early 1990s. And this is what really helped showcase their technological innovations. In hindsight, yeah, they look pretty simple, but no one had seen animations with shadows, or they couldn't populate trees and leaves and make them look real. So this was a big step for them to show that their technology not only worked, but that it was feasible for bigger projects. By the mid-1990s, Pixar's future as a company was still uncertain. Were they going to be an advertising company? Were they going to be a hardware company? Were they just going to get sold, or was the whole thing going to fold? Toy Story, released in 1995, is what's not only saved Pixar, but made them who they are. The movie itself is about 80 minutes long and completely computer generated. That's the first of its kind. No one had ever seen anything like that. The film still stands among the lifetime world gross value of $365.2 billion, which is unbelievable. I did not realize that
It's unreal.
Yeah, I didn't realize that any sort of intellectual creative property could cost that much. So the film's success saved Pixar from folding and proved that the concept of a fully animated film can not only succeed, but thrive immensely. But Pixar actually didn't make that much money, especially early on. They signed a pretty desperate deal with Disney back in 1991 to help make Toy Story. Pixar got a 12.5% cut of the ticket sales. Disney owned all the rights to all the characters, and Pixar was on the hook for at least 2 more films for Disney. So
that is a steep compensation package. That they have signed of, like, you'll receive, these benefits, but also these are your stipulations. I mean, that deal, to be a fly on the wall of those negotiations.
Oh my goodness. So in 1997, back in 91, Disney didn't own Pixar or anything like that. They were just working together. It was still its own separate entity owned by Steve Jobs. In 1997, though, Pixar and Disney signed a new 10-year deal for future movies that included a much more fair 50-50 split. And this is when Pixar went on a run unlike anything we've ever seen in filmmaking history. It was just a murderer's row of perfect movies, just back to back to back to back. Let's read them, yeah?
And I will say, their second movie is, I think, my favorite Pixar movie.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So the first movie, I'll just read.
That I had on VHS.
I'm going to read to y'all, basically, I think 15, 16 straight movies that are all, to me, like 9s and 10s. Toy Story, A Bug's Life, Toy Story 2, Monsters, Inc., Finding Nemo, The Incredibles, Cars, Ratatouille, WALL-E, Up, Toy Story 3. I don't think you can beat that run of movies.
No.
That's just, that Pixar didn't miss for 15 straight years, basically.
But then,
I don't want to get ahead of myself, but they do trip a little bit here, okay?
Ugh.
So during this run, other animation studios started popping up. DreamWorks, Sony, Blue Sky, which no longer exists, by the way, Blue Sky. They all started popping up because of Pixar's success. In 2006, Apple sold Pixar to Disney for $7.4 billion. So once you're at the top, though, you can only go down from there. And
encouraging.
Toy Story 3, for me personally, was the end of their run. In 2011, they released Cars 2, and that was, and that was really one of the first times that Pixar had a, not even totally negatively reviewed a movie, just finally not a...
They didn't meet the expectations,
right.
Or I think they missed the mark of the standards that they've set for themselves. This is a company that helped build a new industry. They were considered the elite, and that movie, Cars 2, I think just didn't uphold the standards that they had set for themselves. It just slightly missed the mark.
Yeah, because when you look back at the movie,
it was kind of violent.
Exactly. It really was. It didn't seem like a Pixar movie at all. And part of the reason why, I think, is because all of the movies leading up to that had... happy. Well, not even just happy. They had some emotional complexity. They told stories that are evergreen. You know, they're growing up kind of stories, you know, and when Cars 2 came out, audience complained that the film itself lacked emotional complexity and the deep narratives that previous Pixar films had portrayed so well. They weren't really expecting Tow Mater to be a spy. Like, it's just not
right.
The kind
well,
of movie.
So to me, this is where, so I did like an evaluation of like Pixar versus DreamWorks. And Pixar, their overarching themes usually fall into parenting, aging, or friendship. Those are themes that have more complex emotions. DreamWorks focuses more on the humor than the theme, so they let the theme be overshadowed by the humor, by the fantastical. And so when Pixar inched towards that, which is not their niche, is when everybody who is a fan of Pixar was like, this just is off-brand, because it was. That's not the brand that they built for themselves.
And as you mentioned, around this time, other animation studios were releasing really good movies, critically acclaimed movies. Rio, Rango, Puss in Boots around that time. Puss in Boots 2 last year came out, and it was one of the best movies I'd ever seen. It was incredible.
I haven't seen either one.
It's an incredible movie. They're both really good. Puss in Boots 2 is fantastic. Although Pixar's reputation was taking a hit, they still enjoyed massive financial success with later releases like Finding Dory, Toy Story 4, Monsters University. It's not like they weren't making money and doing well financially, but their reputation had taken a hit. And this is really the first time that Pixar's reputation as this perfect movie-making company finally had some blemishes on it. One of the biggest death blows to Pixar.
Another blemish, one would say.
Yeah, in more ways than one. So in 2017, longtime executive John Lasseter stepped down from his position. And I say stepped down, he did not do this voluntarily because there were allegations of sexual misconduct in the workplace. 2017, that was the whole Me Too movement. He was also part of that. Lasseter was extremely important to Pixar. He oversaw every film produced by Pixar, and he directed both Toy Story 1 and 2, Cars, A Bug's Life. He got the run started.
Which makes me so sad because because Bug's Life was my favorite one.
Exactly.
I still I have seen A Bug's Life in the last 2 years.
Yeah, I have very
I love that movie.
I have very distinct memories of the VHS box, that green plastic VHS case that, if you remember, the kind of like potato chip bags are like 50% air, 50% DVD.
I remember renting that movie from our
Blockbuster?
movie gallery back when the boxes were either purple or yellow.
That's right. Yeah, I told you guys this is going to be nostalgic. That was a big hit for Pixar, obviously, when John Lasseter had to step down. And then 3 years later, 2020, the pandemic itself exposes flaws in not only every other business in America, but also Pixar's as well, and also highlighted their pretty obvious decline in creativity. I'll say it.
What a claim.
I'll say it, yeah, absolutely. All right, so Pixar's 2020 film Onward came out right before the pandemic shut everything down. Like, I think it came out in early March. Everything shut down in middle to late March. So it flopped in theaters, as you would expect. I'm not going to hold that one against them. And I also never saw it, so I can't speak to the quality of the movie, but I can tell you it flopped because of circumstances outside their control. However, the next three films, Soul, Luca, and Turning Red, were all Disney Plus exclusives. Because of this, because they got released directly to Disney Plus, no theaters, families got used to expecting movie releases on streaming. And many members of Pixar voiced their concerns with the direction that the company was taking. Not only is it less profitable to send it straight to streaming, but in many ways there's less pressure as well, which is going to soften the creativity. You don't have to take as many chances. In 2002, Pixar returned to the big screen with Lightyear. This film I have thoughts on. The film itself got mixed reviews from critics, and it didn't perform very well in the theaters, at least not as well as they projected. The problem, at least in my opinion, with Lightyear is, so the premise of it is it's supposed to be like your Andy from Toy Story watching the movie or the show that inspired Andy to go get the Buzz Lightyear action figure in the theaters, right? So the whole movie itself, other than having Buzz Lightyear in it, nothing to do with Toy Story.
Well, yeah, it's a spinoff.
Absolutely, and that's fine. But
I think it's sad to do a spinoff of Toy Story.
They've already done 4 Toy Story movies.
Right.
They don't need a spinoff. And then
did you ever watch Air Bud?
Yeah.
There were so many of those. I think that we don't need to do that to Toy Story.
No, but I think the problem really with it is that the reason that all the Toy Stories, even 1, 2, 3, 4, you can keep doing sequels and they'll probably still be good. 3 was
questionable.
No,
3 was the best one. 4 was the questionable one. That, I feel like, but still, we could have stopped at 3.
Still fine, yeah. I mean, sure, but the thing about it that still made it successful, though, is that these are recognizable characters in a recognizable setting with a somewhat recognizable story. Right. Lightyear was a sci-fi movie. It was a sci-fi movie starring Buzz Lightyear, which is fine. It's just this isn't the move I would have made. It feels off-brand again, right? It feels very off-brand.
They tried something new that just didn't.
There's no lesson.
Work out.
If you had told me that entire movie was written and produced and everything by AI, would probably believe you because it just felt that shallow. I'm getting upset. Let's breathe. All right. So Pixar's latest release, Elemental, just came out in theaters, and it's another box office flop. The movie itself on opening weekend only brought in about $30 million domestically, despite having a budget of $200 million. This is less than The Good Dinosaur, which had 39, less than Lightyear, who had 51.
Good Dinosaur was
questionable, and even Onward, who only spent like 2-3 weeks in the theaters, made more.
There were reports of decline. Like, this topic came up. I saw an article that was released in 2018 talking about this. So this isn't like a new revelation.
It's picking up again.
I think people are just massively upset over some of the more recent releases, and it's not getting better. Whereas in the past, we've maybe taken some strange directions, and then we turn around and release something like Brave. Love it. Phenomenal movie.
But look at this, in the 2010s, Toy Story 3, Cars 3, Incredibles 2, Toy Story 4. Like, half of the 2010s were sequels. They couldn't come up with anything original. And then the ones that they didn't do all that great. In the 2010s, Brave was pretty good. Monsters University, pretty good. I love Inside Out. Good Dinosaur, not good.
Objectively.
Finding Dory was good. Cars 3, I actually never saw because I was so disappointed in Cars 2, but I haven't heard anything great about it, so I
didn't
don't know.
see Cars 3 either because Cars 2 was not a children's movie.
Coco in 2017, great movie. I loved Coco. Incredibles 2 was good. Toy Story 4 was fine. But in the 2020, Soul, I will go to bat for Soul. I think that's a great movie. And I think it's because Pixar actually did what Pixar does, and they told a very complicated story and made it digestible for kids.
So here's what the difference between. So I looked at a couple of surveys, and one was taken in 2022 comparing the strengths and weaknesses of Disney versus Pixar. So Pixar, 63% of the people that were surveyed, and there were 3,100 respondents. So it was a pretty big pool that they're looking at. 63% said that Pixar has better storylines. 51.8% said they have a better cast lineup. Their voice actors.
Half and half, all right.
There are more recognizable voices. But again, that's 51.8, so it wasn't, I mean, it's pretty close to a central split. Disney, 63.9% said had a better soundtrack, and 66.7% said had happier endings.
I mean, the better soundtrack part is questionable. Randy Newman, legend. The soundtrack of my childhood.
Like Phil Collins.
Yeah, you got me there.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, all you gotta do is hold up Tarzan and you beat me. You beat me. Yeah, you beat me on that one.
In that same survey, okay, take a guess. This was the most popular movie in 35 states.
Between Pixar and Disney?
Pixar only movies.
Pixar only movies, the most popular one in 35 states. I mean, I would guess Toy Story, but I'm gonna guess it's not.
Oh, it was Toy Story.
Oh, it is? Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Also, 3 in 4 people that they surveyed believed that Pixar has improved with time.
What was that percentage?
So 75%.
75% think they improved? I am not in the majority.
Right?
I'm not in the majority.
Who's a surprising number to find on that survey?
So the people who are saying that Pixar has lost their touch is a small but vocal crowd, is what I'm gathering from this.
I suppose.
And I am one of the few, the proud, the Pixar lovers.
Now moving from Disney to DreamWorks from that survey I mentioned earlier.
So this is Pixar versus DreamWorks now?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Pixar is considered more adult friendly than Disney because of the complex storylines. There is something for everyone to kind of pick up on. So as a parent, oftentimes you end up watching the movies with your children. And then as adults, it gives us something to attach to. And so that's where we see a wider demographic that are watching it. And so I think that it's important to keep that in mind when we're looking at the ones that flopped as well, because it's not just children. These are adults rating a movie that is supposed to be friendly for both children and adults. So I think it is kind of hard to put Cars up next to Shrek. And then when Pixar decided to be a little bit edgier, we get things like Cars 2 that feel wildly inappropriate for the brand of Pixar.
Yeah. I didn't really think of it that way, but that makes a lot of sense.
So I think that the 3 of 4 that we're seeing, they are, I mean, keep in mind, the 3 of 4 was Disney over Pixar. Yeah. They probably like the really niche feel of Pixar movies, and that's why they say that they see it improving over time.
Part of the reason why people like me, I guess the 25% that think Pixar is declining, I read a theory that basically as we age with Pixar, we kind of have that nostalgic, well, things were better back in my day approach to things. And you know what? I'm willing to admit that maybe I am just the old man who's yelling.
Are we aging out of Pixar?
I am probably the old man who's yelling, get off my lawn and bring back Toy Story. Bob Iger, who's the returning CEO of Disney, one of his first announcements back in February was to say, Toy Story 5, we're going to get back on track. I mean, if the well hasn't run dry yet, go ahead. Me personally, I would love to see them take a few more swings, be a bit more original. However, maybe they need money, you know?
I don't know.
To me, a bunch of sequels like that just screams cash cow. You know? And if
I agree.
And if we get to the point where there's as many Toy Stories as there are Fast and Furious movies, we're in trouble. I would rather not see, and again, this is old man get off my lawn, but I would rather not see my childhood favorite movie get commercialized like that.
And I think there's factors into what's happening with movies. We're, I think, latching on to the idea of Toy Story so much because it was so revolutionary. It was such a groundbreaking movie. And we've seen a couple of others, you know, kind of come up along with time, like Up was another one that really confronted a heavy emotion.
In the first 10 minutes, it confronted
right,
it.
but in a longer extended period of time than maybe some of the other movies up to that point that was dubbed a children's movie. I look at that and think, is there an evolution of like their movies that they're trying to push through and they can't get to that, so they're trying to capitalize on like a former chain instead of breaking into something new?
And that's been a common theme with movies lately. I'm sure you've all noticed the influx of sequels and remakes. And I read up a little bit on that. It really just comes down to, it's easier to get a movie or series greenlit if there's already an existing fan base for it, or an existing
because it's for the fan base.
Exactly. And so
but I think what they're not taking into consideration is today's children and today's viewers view differently. We have different behaviors than we did at the launch of Pixar.
Absolutely.
Right? Like we have shorter versions of a lot of things that we can go through. The number of like movies that have come down to television shows. Kids like to consume in smaller bite-sized pieces that way. I mean, we've always done that. That's why, TV shows are still alive. We also have access to so much now that a lot of parents are probably also showing their favorites, their childhood favorites, revisiting that bank with children today. And then I would say we also see fewer outings as families to the movie theaters. There's more to do, a little bit more as far as like going out, enjoying ourselves. Like kids can get a very similar experience at home that they could in the movie theater. And a parent probably isn't going to choose the price of the theater over the comfort of their home.
And at home they have,
if they're going to go out, the odds of them going to a movie theater are what percentage?
Not great anymore.
I would be interested to see the streaming numbers that we've picked in theaters compared to the number of streams on different services.
That's okay. Thank you. That's what I was going to bring up. You just reminded me. People have so many options now, right? So, back in the 90s, early 2000s, you couldn't just stay home and pick a TV show to watch or pick a movie to watch. I mean, you kind of could, but it wasn't.
You could look at the TV guide and let it scroll and tell you what's playing
you
on
could
each
go
channel.
Buy a DVD and then you could play it whenever you wanted to. But nowadays, Pixar is competing with YouTube. They're competing with Netflix, Hulu, TikTok.
Sling, Peacock. I mean, like you name it, there's all kinds of different.
Yeah. And I think that might be what it really all comes down to, is just decision fatigue. Too many options. They can pick whatever they want. It's not like Toy Story it's not like, the next Pixar movie is the only movie in town.
There's more being produced every year. There are more movie releases every year, it seems like. Whereas when animation was a newer type of technology, when these movies were being made, there was a lot of stretch.
There was events too. It was an event when one of those movies came out.
It was a bigger deal that there was a movie release. Now, unless if there's something that's like wildly intriguing about it, or an actor or actress that you like, or a producer or a director that you're seeing again, I feel like people are choosing the movies that they want to see a little bit differently as well. Absolutely. Because our mediums have kind of opened up. There's so much, like you said, there's just option fatigue. There's opportunity out the wazoo.
Yeah. And I think that's really one of the biggest things about it. But I don't want to talk too negatively about Pixar much longer. I feel like the audience gets the idea that I am a cranky old man.
Do our draft then.
So what we're going to do now is, we're going to draft Pixar movies, and we're going to dig deep into our nostalgia and see what roster of movies we can come up with.
I've already shared my number one.
She sure has.
A Bug's Life.
I can see that. It's a classic. Absolutely.
It is.
For my first pick, give me Toy Story 2.
Ooh.
Not Toy Story 1. Toy Story 2 is my favorite. Alice Toy Barn. It's a classic. And Zurg was in that movie too. Big fan of Zurg. Emperor Zurg, yeah.
Second pick, The Incredibles. Such a good movie. I feel like it took the idea of superheroes that adults and young adults love and blended that with like the perfect amount of childhood sparkle while keeping a storyline. I think it was very well done. It was everything that Pixar embodies. It was witty. It was clever. It had its tender and sentimental moments. That is one that I have watched and rewatched a dozen times.
I can tell. Yeah, you got a little sparkle in your eye just talking about it.
We literally just named somebody on our team Mrs. Incredible. If that was going to be her character.
Sure. All right, good pick there. Okay, for my second pick, I'm gonna take Finding Nemo.
Okay.
The piano soundtrack in that is extremely soothing, and don't touch the butt. Don't touch the butt.
Those are two wildly different criteria.
They both apply. They both work. That's why it's a great movie.
Okay. All right. Third round. Mine is up. Y'all, my favorite character in that whole movie is Kevin the bird.
Kevin. That was going to be my pick. All right. My third pick, Cars.
Really?
I'm going to take Cars. I don't know if I've seen it as much as Toy Story, but it's up there. I've seen it a lot. I can quote a lot of that movie. When I was a kid, I was in love with NASCAR. So this just hit everything for me. I was a huge fan of it, still am, which is why I was devastated with Cars 2. And we'll probably never see Cars 3. That's my third pick.
Okay.
Life is a highway.
Okay. My next one is Monsters University.
Not even Monsters, Inc. You're going to take Monsters University.
Okay, it's a tough one, but I enjoyed the evolution of the characters in the second. I did. Okay, listen. Monsters, Inc. for a time in college was the only DVD that I had, and I watched it all the time.
That's sad.
Honestly, I could probably put Monsters, Inc. up there with A Bug's Life as my top favorites. If I had to choose,
you love it so much you haven't even picked it.
I listen. I do. I love that movie.
Uh-huh.
I wanted to name my dog Sully, but I got a girl dog, so I didn't do that. It's a funny movie, but I like the element of the continuity, but evolution in the second one. And I think Monsters University might be my favorite sequel of any
prequel, technically.
Sure,
but yeah,
but released as sequel, movie that I think I've ever seen. And I think that's why I put that one specifically.
And I respect you for going off the board a little bit and picking something different. And because of that, for my fourth pick, I won't take Monsters, Inc., even though I would like to.
You can have that one and I'll have University. That's fair.
I'll take Monsters, Inc. with my fourth pick. That way we just complete the set.
Cool.
All right, what's your fifth pick?
Inside Out.
That was going to be mine, man.
Okay, then I'll go to my... No, I have an alternate.
No, I know what I'm going to pick. You can take it. I got it. Go ahead.
Okay, well, Inside Out.
All right. I'm going to, with my fifth pick, I'm taking Soul. I think Soul is one of the most underrated Pixar movies. I think it got a bad rap because it was one of the first Disney Plus releases. But that, to me, did not make it a bad movie. I think that what I liked about that movie is that it showed me that it's okay not to be special, if that makes any sense. Because, I watched it at a time where I was like, what am I doing with my life? I need to figure out what my thing is. I don't know. And the whole premise of that movie is just you don't have to know everything, man. You don't have to be a certain thing. Just you's good. You're fine. You're good. Don't worry about it. And that just made me feel really good for a long time. So I'm putting Soul there, even though most people wouldn't even have it in their top 10.
Well, I picked Inside Out for a sentimental reason. This is so specific, but that anger was positioned as a positive attitude. Anger was still a very good,
a necessary emotion,
character. I mean, at the heart of the movie was a wonderful character.
And bing bong.
It was a really cute movie. That was one that I smiled. I may have teared up once or twice, watching the whole thing from start to finish. So as an adult who grew up watching Pixar films, seeing that one was I feel like this has grown up with me.
Yeah. That's how I felt with Soul.
It was a little bit more complex, yeah.
All right. Well, you know what? I'm proud of both of our lists. Good job. All right, guys. So that's going to be the end of the podcast today, going over all the Pixar stuff. Hopefully that turns around. I'd love to come back and do another episode about the comeback of Pixar.
Overall, do we think Pixar is failing in quality?
I think they're failing in quality, yes.
Okay. Well, that didn't end on the positive note I thought it would, so...
Sorry.
We'll see you next week.
See you guys next week. Sorry. You set me up to do it perfectly.
I thought you would have changed your mind.
And I was like, nope, still sucks.